In this section, we are going to tackle routing network technologies. Now, routing technologies are going to make up the vast majority of what we're going to take a look at through the rest of this particular service provider series, whether it's going to be the SP NGN 1 and or 2. The big thing here is to understand the fundamentals first, and that's what we're going to be covering. We're going to cover what exactly routing is and how it works and how you should approach IP routing and what the different pieces of it are. So the first thing we're going to take a look at and work on is going to be the functions of routing. What is a router? What is the routing table? What is the what is the FIB, the forwarding information base? How does a router route? What are the components that make up a router, and why the router has different parts to it, what those individual parts do, and how do you put it all together. This will be very, very beneficial as you go down the road. And when you start getting into your troubleshooting aspects of things, you'll be able to fall back on the fundamentals and go, okay, if I was a packet and I was trying to hit a router, what would be the very first thing that I would need to think about? And this is going to help you with troubleshooting throughout your career. We'll also then take a look at an introduction to Cisco's iOS XR. Now, for those of you that have never spent any time on iOS XR, it's an operating system that's been around for quite some time with Cisco. I think it came out in 2004, 2005 timeframe. So it's been out for about 10 years or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. And iOS XR is going to be the platform that you're going to see predominantly in the service provider environment. Now, it's not solely in the service provider environment. I do have, and I have seen a few customers that have larger platforms like the ASR 9000, commonly referred to as the 9K, things like that. Not to be confused with the Nexus 9K, totally different platform. But from the area that we're going to be focusing on here, that is going to be the place that we're going to spend some time on that. So we're going to understand how iOS XR works, its different setups, and how you can progress through iOS XR. Then I will walk you guys through how to do a very, very simple configuration of iOS XR and the different techniques that you would need to do, things like that. So I've actually already got both iOS XR routers up and running. I'm actually going to take a router and I'm going to blow it away, blow away the configuration. I'm going to rebuild it. So in case you guys have viral or you've downloaded the iOS XR VM from Cisco's FTP site, you'll be able to go in and know how to manipulate iOS XR to work with it from there on. Then we'll take a look at configuring basic routing. So this is going to include, but won't be limited to, working with the static routing, default routing, things like that. So you'll understand what exactly it means to do forwarding traffic and how you can progress through the router. What are the steps that a router takes in order to route, things like that. Well then, once we've covered how basic routing works with static routing, default routing, things like that, then we'll get into configuring RIP version 2. So it's on the blueprint, we're going to cover it. We're not going to go super, super deep with RIP version 2, so we're not going to cover literally every command option that's there. We're going to cover a few of them. We'll take a look at getting basic IPv4 RIP running, how you can do a default route, how you can do some summarization. Then we'll take a look at how you can do some authentication, and then we'll take it RIP with RIP NG or IPv6 for RIP, and exactly how that comes into play. That's going to be pretty much the majority of what we're going to do with RIP. Just a basic configuration option. I will let you guys take it from there, how deep you want to go into RIP. Now, the reason why it's even covered in this portion of the exam is because the fact of where you might have RIP as a PE to CE routing protocol. You might have RIP as a, in the case of the company that I work for, we do both. We do consulting services and we also provide transport and services for customers. So I actually have to know how to do the service provider side of the house as well as working with customers on deploying their networks and things like that, so the consulting side of the house. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll need to know RIP version 2 for customer equipment that may not be all Cisco. They might have Netgear and the only routing protocol that might be available is RIP. So I'll have to take that into consideration. Now, once we run through RIP and how it works, then we'll take a look at configuring EIGRP. So honestly, there's no Cisco routing based anything that has anything to do with routing, any routing or any track that has any type of routing involved in it would not be complete without at least a little bit of EIGRP thrown in. EIGRP is a pretty easy protocol to work with, and you'll see as we go through, we're going to take a look at several different areas of EIGRP and how it gets working. EIGRP in the simplest term is actually a very easy protocol to work with. You'll see that as we progress through. It's just understanding, like all the other options that you see on your screen, just understanding the fundamentals. And that's pretty much where we're going to start here. We're going to go through, run through how everything works, and then a couple of implementation options to show you how to go from there, which will launch you in the right direction because you may have to deal with RIP in the real world. You might have to deal with EIGRP in the real world. And once we get into the second half of the SPNGN into SPNGN Part 2, we will then take a look at OSPF and ISIS later on in the second half of the CCNA. But for right now, this is what's on the blueprint. That's what we're going to cover. And then we're going to wrap up this section with basic router security. Different ways of configuring access to the router and things like that. Nothing too deep. And a lot of what we're going to be covering in router security is going to be a lot of individual configuration options like SNMP, syslog, user groups, logging in with AAA, things like that. A lot of that's just going to be specific to the local router and any of those technologies that have anything to do with security specific. So that's where we're going to work on our way there and go from there.